Welcome to ABCDE. I'm the host, P-Man.
I am 老白.
We are super excited to have the founder of Dojo to join our podcast today. Loaf, do you want to say hi to our audience?
GM, yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Good to be here and good to chat all things Onchain.
Yeah, first of all, I think, Loaf, you can introduce yourself and also introduce a little bit about Dojo to our audience.
Yeah, sure. Love to. So I'm Loaf. I'm one of the core contributors of Dojo, as well as one of the core contributors of Biblioteca DAO, which is a on-chain gaming DAO, which is really the origins of how I got into this space. A little quick, quick couple of minutes about myself. I've been a long time full stack developer building businesses in kind of Web 2 land, and a long time crypto investor since 2014, 2015. And I've always been kind of I've always been in this space, but I haven't been a full-time builder up until about 3 years ago. And that was purely because I was kind of busy with other stuff that I was doing, and I was watching all the market, and I knew, it was really early. I mean, up until DeFi summer, I mean, no one really knew. No, everyone was just making crappy L1s clones, right? No one was really doing anything. It was only really in DeFi summer started to happen that real applications started getting built, and it started to get really interesting. So then I kind of dived back into Solidity development back then, but I never really found anything deep in the DeFi world that I wanted to go all in on. And then you fast forward a couple years, and Loot happens, and everybody knows what happened with Loot. Loot was this idea of a bottom-up world build, and in a way, it really is like one of the Genesis autonomous worlds. If you, however way you want to think about it, Loot was really just an idea that anyone could build on this decentralized primitive. And when Loot happened, it really kind of got me thinking, and I thought, well, I think this is something that I really want to go all in and commit and try to build something crazy with. And so a week after Loot happened, a buddy of mine, Redbeard, we created a site called Biblioteca for Loot, which was just a subgraph basically, that just graphed all the Loot projects together, and you could just come and log in. You could see all the Loot stuff you had. And from there, we thought, well, what do we want to go next? And we thought, well, let's try and build an on-chain game. And back then, it was on-chain games were pretty early. There wasn't really anything that existed. There was really Dark Forest was, still doing rounds. And there was Conquest, and there was a couple of other teams doing stuff, but it was really quite early back then. And so we tried to build a game running on Arbitrum, and we kind of quickly realized that this was pre-mud and pre-engine or anything, so it was really stitching together a bunch of the existing kind of infrastructure, and it was it was clunky and kind of not very performant and whatnot. And but while designing the game, I kind of realized that I didn't think the EVM and Solidity is a very good structure to build expansive worlds. And from day one, really the idea for us has always been, let's build an expansive world that anyone can contribute to. That's really been the number one driving factor. And we've come a long way, and building everything in the open is a challenge because your ideas change and your initial thesis is always evolve. That single vision of building an expansive world that anyone can contribute to is never swayed. And yeah, then fast forward. Well, when we were building the game, we realized EVM really kind of it was struggling. We're getting stack limits, we're getting contract size limits and whatnot. And at that time, Starknet was kind of starting to appear, and I kind of went down the rabbit hole of Snarks and Starks, and it kind of really flicked a switch in my mind, thinking that we really want to build something long term here, and long term ZK is going to win out in the kind of scaling scene. And so we were like, well, let's try and build on Starknet. It's probably early right now, but it has the promise to be a more performant VM, give us more capacity in what we can do in the future. We won't be bottlenecked by any performance, and so that's what we did. And so a year and a half has gone by, and we're we're building games in the Starknet ecosystem, using Cairo. Yeah, and so right now we've got the DAO. I mean, a lot's happened in the last year and a half, but yeah, right now we're building two games. We're building Loot Survivor, which is a very efficient single player roguelike on-chain game that's going to be deployed on Starknet, hopefully in the next month on mainnet. And we're also building our kind of flagship aspirational autonomous world, starting with this mod called Eternum, which is really the economic layer of our world. And we're building that in open, and all this stuff is open source, so anyone can come and contribute to it.
Actually, it's quite interesting because me and Chow are all a fan of Loot. We are the most early adopters in Asia, and actually, I'm one of the biggest Loot holders.
Oh, nice. Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and is Dojo also a Loot ecosystem project, or are you positioning yourself or
No,
anything?
yeah. So Dojo kind of was spawned in about October
Mhm.
of last year, when it was really started off as just a Telegram group, which I created and just basically pulled in a bunch of the other Starknet teams, because everyone in the Starknet ecosystem is quite close and everybody helps each other, and everyone's quite collaborative. And at that time, there was it was a transition from Cairo 0 to Cairo 1. And for the last year, we'd kind of been building our game and infrastructure based around this initial engine, which was designed actually by this guy named E05, which was like a module controller system, which we had heavily modified, and that's what we kind of built our original game on. But by going down that path, we realized that it's not if you want to build an expansive world that people are going to contribute to, you need a set of standards, and you need very consistent standards that people can easily just come and add to that piece of software. It's the age-old software dilemma. It's you need good documentation and you need good standards if you want people to contribute to it. And these worlds, if we really want to see these autonomous worlds reach this the scale that we're all talking about, then we need this standardization. And I mean, it's why we all use ERC20 and ERC 721, right? It's this set of standards that we can build infrastructure around. And the idea with Dojo is that it was definitely inspired by my MUD's architecture, and it's inherited the ECS system, but it's definitely going in its own trajectory. The MUD definitely had an unlock of the thinking in that very modular ECS manner. So Dojo really just brings this set of standards to build games, but it's very much like a grassroots open source project. It's I'm a contributor to Biblioteca DAO and to Dojo, and anyone can contribute to Dojo, but it's a neutral it's a neutral organization. It's totally open source and MIT.
Right. So are those two games that you mentioned before you're building, are they using Dojo as well?
So we actually started Loot Survivor before Dojo existed. Well, before it was in a stable manner. And the idea with Loot Survivor was that we wanted to actually ship something on mainnet. And until EIP 4844 happens, and call data becomes significantly cheaper, it's very hard to run a big world or a very intensive game on one of these L2s. It's just too expensive. But what we're doing with Loot Survivor, we're basically compressing all the game state into a single storage slot to make an on-chain game as cheap as possible. And so it's not using Dojo because it's not Dojo's not audited just yet. It's kind of still in development cycle. But I imagine that the Loot Survivor version 2 will be using Dojo in a couple months. We'll probably refactor it all to use it. But Eternum, yes. So Eternum's been building with Dojo since Dojo was incepted, basically, and it's probably the most it's got a lot of, if you want to see a full-blown Dojo project that has lots of components and lots of systems, it's got a lot of that. And we've got an end-to-end version running, so you can jump into the Discord, and on Fridays we do play tests.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
And I'm always very curious that now as everyone's talking about the game engines of autonomous world or fully on chains, started from MUD and Lattice, and then comes with Dojos and also Argus, etc. But Because B-Man and me, we both playing games for like 10 or 20 years. And when we talk about the traditional game engines such as Unreal and Unities, I still remember that when the Unreal 5 was published, that game, that showing demo, like the little girl
Yeah.
a cave and then jumping on the mountains and the temples, was really impressive. It's more about like the show of the graphics, the textures, the rendering, the physics. But I remember when the mod comes up, it's the setting point is completely different. It's like a ECS, it's entity, component, and system, which more like a framework of the traditional game engine. So, what do you see the fully on-chain game engine? How come it's using these things as a setting point? What's actually the core components of a gaming engine such as Dojo and the mod?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, like Dojo and Mud doesn't bring in don't bring any graphics, right? Like it's really they're trying to solve this kind of the architectural challenges of writing a game in smart contracts, and the challenges of indexing the data of the game and syncing it. Like you really have three things when you're talking about when you're trying to build these on-chain games, excluding even the kind of including the graphics. You have like you got your contracts which are deployed onto a network, and then you got your indexing, which is like your kind of like cache data, and then you got your client, right, which can be Unreal Engine or can be Unity or it can just be like a web browser or running with some graphics or something. And you really need all three of those things to like talk and sync very efficiently. Otherwise, you get very bad latency and you get a very bad play experience. And Dojo and Mud basically is trying to solves that problem, syncing of your chain state and your index state with your client. And so it's not promising of bringing like crazy Unreal Engine 5 graphics, because that's what Unreal is excellent for, right? But Unreal doesn't have any networking to a blockchain. It doesn't show you how to write, it doesn't show you how to architect smart contracts, for example. It's kind of like Dojo and Mud is like the data layer and like the contracts, but it's bring your own client.
I see. So if in a imagination that if we have a super fast layer 2 and very mature infrastructure, that means you can't actually combining Unreal as the graphic layer and then Dojo or Mod as the data layer, that make a fully on-chain with very good graphics.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, you could do that now, but yeah, it's hard to sync those engines efficiently there, and also like we'll see pretty fast like networks. I mean, you can already get really fast side chains, but if we really want security, and like we really do want security in these worlds, and we don't want to sacrifice what we're trying to build here and just repeat the old model of games, right? It's like if we go down the path of just making a sidechain and that's like super fast and it's it's a single sequencer and it's like a 5-person multi-sig or something, and it's connected to an Unreal Engine. Yeah, sure, you have a on-chain game that's running Unreal, but is it really what we want? We've just repeated. We probably just made a worse game. We've made a worse centralized game of we don't really need Mud or Dojo in that scenario, right? It's like, well, you may as well just use a database. And this is why honestly I got into crypto in the first place, is after learning about Bitcoin's key innovation was removing a trusted third party. And we don't want to repeat that just to try to do something. We don't want to repeat the just Web 2 world where we have distrusted third party, right? We want to build these new experiences where we can really trust these games that we're playing, that this data isn't going to just get rugged by this central team, right? We actually have a level of guarantee around it, and we can only really do that when we have a when we're running on a true L2 or an L3, like a true one, not a sidechain.
So, yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And recently, I think I've read articles that Mod released their V2 version, which is transformed from the ECS structure to different. Like they use table.
Yeah, they've done a really cool innovative thing. They've created a very optimized SQL, basically running in we're using Yule, which is like the low level EVM language, which allows you to create tables on chain. So you can basically recreate you can easily create like an SQL like database in your world, which then you can query in any way you want.
Would this be the directions that you guys go as well, or you guys trying to do something different, mate?
I think we're like in Dojo's backend, like the state is kind of indexed in that way. Anyway, like it's kind of we're using a table structure, but we're really focused on like the narrow vertical of gaming. So we're optimizing everything for games, and it's hard enough to architect smart contracts for games. So we want to really build Dojo and optimize it for around the ECS. Like the way Dojo works is we've forked the Cairo compiler. Well, kind of extended it. Probably a better way to think about it. We've extended it and we've injected a bunch of like shorthand functions into it, which allow you to like write like a shorthand. Like you can write shorthand commands which expand out into more complex queries. So we've kind of created a scripting language on top of Cairo, so you can kind of really prototype and write your games significantly faster. Yeah, so Dojo, like what's unique about Cairo, which I think a lot of people don't quite aware of, is that it was designed by Starkware to kind of compile to these little ZK circuits. So you can, if you write a program in Cairo, you can prove its integrity. And so that's how Starks work, right? And that's how Starknet works. And so Dojo, and like one of the big things that we're trying to do with Dojo is really lean into that and create what we call provable games. And what we mean by provable games is you can write these really complex games in Cairo, and you can run them in your browser, and you can kind of like generate a proof, like a ZK proof of you playing that game in your browser using your browser's computation, and then you can just verify that proof that you've played truthfully. And so if you think about that, it's like we still get the integrity of like an on-chain game. So like you can't cheat because you can't actually fool that system. It's like if you can't cheat in it, right? And but when you offload the compute to your browser, well, your browsers, there's plenty of compute around the world in your browsers and all devices. And if we can just generate these little proofs of you running these games, then we can really we can open the design space of what we can do with these games, right? So like an example would be like Loot Survivor, for example. Like Loot Survivor is like, it's all the computation is running on Starknet right now. And when you do a transaction, Starknet runs the computation and updates the state, right? But there's a path where we could create a Loot Survivor style game, in Dojo, and you could run Loot Survivor in your browser, using the Cairo virtual machine, which you can run in your browser. You can play that game, and you play for half an hour, and it all and eventually when you die, a little proof gets generated, and you can submit that proof back to Starknet to verify that you've played that game correctly. And so all the computation, all the state changes that you've done is actually done in your browser. It's not done on the chain. You're just verifying that you've played the game correctly, and that's the only transaction you need to make. And I think that's like that technique in our mind, like the new meta in like 6 to 12 months. It's pretty hard to do right now. It's very hard to do. But that's where we see the whole industry going.
It's like a roll up then in that case.
Well, it's not really a roll up, right? It's kind of, it's not really a roll up.
It's not. It's like a
state channel kind of.
Yeah, state channel, like Lightning Network stuff.
Yeah, it's a state channel, exactly. And
Okay.
so you can even do multiplayer, multiplayer state channels, and you play like you and I, we can play a game of chess, for example. And obviously we don't want to have to do all the moves on chain. We just want to verify that we are doing the moves correctly, and we can do that through a little ZK state channel. And then eventually one of us wins, and we can just submit the proof back to the chain to verify that you've won or I've won. But all the computation, all the state changes has happened off chain, so it's practically free.
that is something that Mud cannot achieve at this stage, I guess.
I think the thing is Solidity isn't designed for writing. It's not a ZK language. It doesn't compile down to these circuits. The way you do it is you need another language. So you need like Circom or something, and to write the ZK circuits in, and you kind of use a combination of Solidity and ZK and Circom. There's a couple other languages like Noir that are coming out that do specialize in this. But that's why Kara is interesting to us, is that it's a general purpose language, so you can write smart contracts and you can deploy them on Starknet and you can run them like that, or you can run them on like other types of Starknets like Madara, which is a new Starknet sequencer, or you can run the Kara code in your browser in WebAssembly. And so it's like isomorphic in that approach, and you can run these Kara programs anywhere.
I see. Yeah, that sounds very cool. Like it's like moving from the cloud computing to the edge computations that can release the design pattern of designing games. And also,
exactly.
Yeah. And Loaf, I want to get some opinions from you about the fully on-chain game as well, because the reason I'm asking that is the GameFi, like Axie or StepN, the first generations, it is it's kind of like poor playability. So people comes for the money, for the earn, not for the play. And even for that, it's still like a entry barrier that people have to know what is MetaMask, they have to know what is blockchain, they have to get some gas, etc. That's already blocked lots of people, so preventing people getting the mass adoptions. And a fully on chain seems even more hardcore, like Dark Forest, right? It's even harder than playing Axie or StepN. So, in your mind, how this autonomous world can resolve this mass adoption issue, and also like what kind of game do you think might suit the fully on-chain game autonomous world best, like a RPG, FPS, or SLG, whatever stuff?
I mean, let's be real. The crypto isn't nearly adopted by anyone. We're still so early in this kind of multi-decade cycle. I'm convicted that eventually there'll be seamless integrations in basically all of our infrastructure and institutions eventually, but we're not there yet. And it's probably actually side note, I mean, I think in 6 to 12 months after 4844 we will see significantly more adoption, because it does open up a lot of more use cases, like very, very low transactional fees, but you can actually trust it. But yeah, in terms of, so there's like, obviously that's a challenge that's like outside of Dojo and Mud, and it's like a general crypto thing, right? But these games will get adoption. I think there's a lot of innovation going into account abstraction at the moment. So there's like 4337 in the EVM space, which is the big step in the right direction, allowing some magic account abstraction, which allows you to to do session keys and whatnot. Starknet's pretty interesting that it's got native account abstraction built in, so it's basically just there from the get-go. And where account abstraction just allows you to do significantly smoother UX when it comes to doing transactions. So you can do like custodial, like hybrid non-custodial wallets. You can do WebAuthn with your fingerprint. You can do session keys built into your browser, so you don't have to keep signing transactions, which really breaks the flow of games. Yeah, I think that's like one of the big unlocks that we all need to keep focusing on, is just like improving the UX. But I think we're almost there, to be honest. Loot Survivors implemented session keys, so you can go and play without having to sign wallets. So that's you'll be able to see the step change in that. I know Mud's got a built-in burner wallet system that allows you to do the same thing. Dojo's got a kind of a burner wallet library as well, so you can do the same thing. In terms of like games that these autonomous worlds types of games, autonomous worlds kind of but really they're going to be like a collection of games, and they're going to be like an ecosystem. And probably like I like to think of it as like, I think Ethereum is Ethereum's architecture is kind of the architecture that we all need to aspire to, like when building these things. Like it should be, I don't think you can just chuck money at an autonomous world and expect it to exist. Like look what happened with the whole L1 scene, right? Like lots of L1s raised ridiculous amounts of money, and they went nowhere. It's because you can't buy social capital. Like you need to build it, and you need to build like an ecosystem organically for things to last. And Ethereum has built that over the last 8 years, and that's why it exists, and that's why it's so robust. Is because it started, yeah, it was the first generalized smart contract platform, but it really had this kind of like grassroots approach. They only raised like $20 million. There's Ethereum Foundation. Everyone started building on it. Kind of like all these standards emerged just organically. Ethereum is basically just a collection of all these smart contracts that exist, and they, and its functionality keeps getting improved with every smart contract that exists on it, right? It's kind of the same thing with these worlds. They'll spawn organically, without any like central authority, and they'll evolve, and people will build on them organically, and then some of them will get escape velocity when that happens. But I do expect that there is going to be a lot of money chucked at trying to build these things, but I don't think it will work. I think you have to build these things grassroots, otherwise they'll just never stick. In terms of like the games on them, like I think there's going to be lots of different games, like RTS style games, like pure economic games, just any type of game you can think of, and probably like a lot of new styles of games that really lend itself to the technology. Hard to say exactly what, because I don't think anyone's actually cracked the secret source of what makes a really interesting on-chain game yet. There's a lot of teams trying to explore it. We have our thesis around what we're doing, and we're trying a lot of different things. And in the DAO, we're encouraging a lot of people to build things. In Dojo, we're giving grants for people to build things, and a lot of other people in the ecosystem are doing the same thing. Yeah, I think it's just in this experimentation phase right now. We all need to just like try a bunch of crazy things.
I see.
We have seen a lot of fully on-chain game in Starkware ecosystems. So Loaf, can you describe a little bit about what is the on-chain gaming ecosystem be like in Starkware, and why many on-chain gaming teams choose Starkware to build their games?
I think it kind of just happened organically. I think it happened because and just to be clear, like I'm like team on-chain gaming. Like I'm building stuff on Starknet, but like if anyone has, if any team is, authentic and, has integrity, I'll support them if they're building an on-chain game, because I think this industry is so small right now that like we all need to support each other and just build it together. We're not like really competing with each other. We're competing against like the whole other industries, like your mobile and PC and whatnot. Starknet's interesting because it uses the Cairo virtual machine, which I was just talking about before, over the EVM. And the Cairo VM has a lot more computational capacity than the EVM. And it doesn't have the same like memory design. So like you can create gigantic contracts with it. You don't get to stack trace limits and all these like things you run into when you're running big contracts in the EVM. I think that was appealing to people, that you do have this kind of like new design space, and you're not kind of like shackled to the EVM. So I think that's why a lot of people chose it. And there was a couple of early people in the ecosystem, like Guilty Gyoza, who did a bunch of crazy like physics simulations. Who kind of like, he was one of the driving factors of why I kind of like looked at Starknet in the first place. And it kind of just lured this like initial crowd of on-chain game builders. I think we started building it in like November 21, and that was really early. That was like before the timestamps or anything. So I think that was kind of just, it kind of happened organically that people just wanted to build on-chain games on Starknet.
Yeah, cool. Another question I'm curious about is that what is your favorite game in Web 2?
Web 2. So I play a bunch of different games. I like the survivor style games. I like roguelikes. I've kind of been obsessed. I keep picking up Vampire Survivor, and I keep playing it. But I also play AoE, Age of Empires 2. I've done a lot of time playing strategy games. I did my StarCraft time. But then I also play like medieval slashers as well. And I also play like kind of slower paced turn-based games like Civilization and Total War and stuff. My Steam library is ridiculously large because I always download new games and try to see what new games are about. So yeah, I don't really have a single favorite. Probably the most hours that I put in is probably strategy, like RTS.
Yeah, my favorite is also strategy game. I have spent about 3,000 hours in Steam playing strategy game. Yeah,
Nice.
but do you play Web3 games, or do you even try any fully on-chain games, or etc. that you would like to play? And can you recommend one or two fully on-chain game to us?
Oh, I don't play any like, Web 2.5 games, kind of games with NFTs. I don't really play any of those games that are really interesting to me. And in terms of on-chain games, like it's still it's still so early, like to be honest. There's not
Okay.
that many that exist because I've been, designing and building Loot Survivor and Eternum. We're playing a lot of that right now. There's a lot of cool games that are coming out. There's like Topology just released their alpha, which is a fighting game called Shoshin, which is actually using that virtual machine in the browser, which I was talking about. It's probably the first kind of like production example of using that technique, although it's not settling to Starknet just yet, but it's like an alpha. It's kind of using the Kara VM in the browser. The Small Brains guys, Small Brain are releasing some interesting games. They just released Words 3, which is like a Scrabble game which uses a variable rate gradual Dutch auction to auction off Scrabble letters, and you try to make words with these letters. That's a really interesting use case of an on-chain game. There's the Playmint guys making Downstream, which is a really interesting game. There's Cartridge, which have developed Ryo, also using Dojo. So Ryo is actually one of the first production games. Well, it's the first production game using Dojo, and it's like a take on the old Drug Wars game from the like calculator. If anyone played that back in the day, it's a game of arbitrage where you go from part of New York City, part of New York City's kind of like locations, and you arbitrage drugs. You buy drugs in one area and then you arbitrage them in another area. It's really cool. There's not that many on-chain games that exist that are live right now. So
Yeah, we spend a lot of time playing Web2 games, especially like strategy games. Do you
mm.
think that we can make this game into Web3 in the near future, like Civilization, for example?
ah yeah, well, I mean, we're trying to kind of do that with Eternum.
Okay.
Civilization's one of the big inspirations. The challenge is building like a totally like an open game that's expandable, that's like balanced. The actual approach that we're taking with these games, and like this is not every on-chain game needs to do this. Our thesis is like we want to build this like we actually want to build an autonomous world that like starts small and like grows and just like becomes like this self-sustaining organism. Our thinking is that it needs to be kickstarted with a like a minimum viable physics kind of game. What we mean by that is Turnum is really designed to be like this first economic layer of the world, and so it's built around the 8,000 realms, and so the 8,000 realms is how Biblioteca DAO is governed. They're NFTs that were they're called loot realms. Eternum is built around these 8,000 realms, and these 8,000 realms have all different resources on them and different properties, and you generate resources and you trade peer to peer with one another. And you can arbitrage different areas of the map. And so they're all positioned on this giant map, all location wise. It's like the initial goal of the game will be to build a topology of the map. And so you'll generate resources, you'll trade resources, you'll craft them, and you'll build these like permanent structures on the map that will be used in the later like ages of the world. You have to manage your realm, you have to manage the happiness level, which is like inspired by the civilization happiness level, and so there's a bunch of metrics that you need to manage, and this is all this is all on chain. But that's really kind of like we're trying to make it as a minimal kind of game as possible, because we feel like these games like you can call them games, but like they're really like they're kind of like open sandboxes games, whatever you want. Like
Right.
it's hard to like shoebox them in like one term, because they're so open that people can come and build on them, and that like then it's like, well, what is this thing? What is it? It's not like the game that we design. It's like this, it's like this network, and like this is some of the logic and some of the system components that we've made, but like other people have come along and built these other things that like extend the game. So like at that point, it kind of loses what the original game like was, but expands it. So it's hard to it's hard to shoebox it. But our thinking is, let's create like the minimal layer possible, and then let people build on the world with all the tools and all the standardization that Dojo brings.
Like unlimited DLCs.
Yeah, it's like unlimited DLCs, unlimited mods, and like that's the idea. And like the original game we designed, and like contributors now, like we still have this idea in our mind of like, all these things we want to include. Impossible to like have a finished like on-chain game that's like balanced because it's open by default. So you never want to start at that end. You want to let the world emerge as much as possible and build with the world rather than trying to fit onto the world what you think it should exactly be in every like balanced way. You need to think of like a natural ecosystem in the wild, right? Like it doesn't just to become natural ecosystems have like they have an equilibrium in balance, like the balance, like all the animals and plants live in harmony, and it's only happened over like millions of years. It's that balance is just formed, but it's like emerged over time. And so we see this as a similar thing happening with these worlds. Like we want to create this like minimal framework, and from that balance and like the ecology of the world will just like form.
Yeah, like you said, like Ethereum, like
Yeah,
you
exactly.
define basic rules and the framework, and
Exactly.
then decide, yeah, all up to you. So in that case, would that be possible for some Stackware game, like the first version of your game? You mentioned that in the V2, it will be using Dojo to like re-transform it. Would that be a hard work? I mean, I was thinking if there's
No. No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest things about the game is just like, what is your game? And like, luckily with Loot Survivor, it was like we've spent a lot of time iterating on the actual like game. Migrating it to Dojo is going to be pretty easy to do because like we already have the game, right? It's just refactoring and kind of like changing the kind of the project structure. But Dojo is designed to be like really easy to get going and really easy to like just iterate on the project because it has this really nice structure to it. So yeah, it's not going to be hard.
right. What about the other games? Like, would that be possible for some other on-chain game on Stackware which is not using Dojo at this stage, and eventually they can merge into Dojo style, or they
I think
get
if they're pre-launched, so if they haven't like launched onto mainnet, but even if in that case you still could do a migration, it'd be easy. I mean, I would definitely recommend that anyone that's actually tried to build one of these games understands how hard it is because there's so many moving parts and you want a level of standardization. So like Dojo brings like an integrated tool chain with it. So it comes with like a local DevNet, comes with a local indexer that just indexes your world without you having to think about it. It's like an automatic indexer. And it comes with a CLI tool that helps you like maintain and manage your world. And people can extend the world easily through that CLI tool too. If a team is thinking about migrating, then I would definitely suggest spending a day or two, even just trying to do it and trying to like migrate your game. I would think that you could migrate the contracts of your game and your logic within a couple days if you already have it established into the kind of a Dojo pattern. Yeah.
Another question that how do you foresee the end game of autonomous world, and can you visualize what the autonomous world be like in the next 5 years or 10 years?
Yeah, I think what we've kind of been talking about is that these autonomous worlds really they act in a way like L1 blockchains. They become this because they're all based around a singular contract. These worlds will. I mean, I suspect one or two of them will really get traction and really become this gigantic world that just like Ethereum itself. Yeah, so I mean, I probably my forecast would be within 12 to 24 months. These worlds are going to be the biggest consumer of block space in the entire crypto industry, just because you consume so many resources. You can think about a game that has 10,000 active users that people are making actions every minute. Like you can just think of the amount of transactions and the amount of state changes that's happening at that point, and that's probably like more block space than like exists. Yeah, these things consume a significant amount of resources. Yeah, and I fully expect maybe in like 6 to 12 months the idea of these things will be downstream in the mainstream crypto sphere, and a lot of people are going to try and build these things because everybody's going to want to be a part of these.
Cool. And do you think that the autonomous world will combine with XR, AR, VR, etc.? We make it like the movie Ready Player One.
uh, maybe with like off-chain compute, like the doing the car VM like off-chain, and or like doing this like client-side proof style computation, then maybe we can get there. But with our traditional blockchain approach of blocks and stuff, then it's going to be hard to recreate like FPS style and fully. Yeah, I mean, you're ultimately still constrained by blockchain and like decentralization. So I think it will form the basis of that. It's really what I mean. It's kind of like Meta, right? Like Meta tried to buy the metaverse, but like obviously it's going to fail because you can't buy these things. Like just like you can't buy an autonomous world, like you need to let these things emerge, and you need to let the metaverse emerge. Like the metaverse is such a dumb thing now, but like it will never be like no one can ever own it. It'll just be this thing that emerges that's owned by everyone, and everyone's a part of it. Just like the internet, right? Like you can't own the internet. Like Microsoft tried to make their own internet in the 90s. That failed just because these networks, no one wants to be owned by any central authority, and it kind of defeats the purpose of them.
Yeah, cool. I think for the last part, what do you want to say to the developers, the game startups, founders in Asia? Do you have anything to say for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say get involved and try to build something with one of these engines. I'm on call to answer any questions that you'll have about Dojo or Realms. So, come and pop into Discord, pop into Telegram and ask questions. But like, I also think that like we're in a stage right now where I would advise against trying to build AAA on-chain games. I would say the best approach now is to try to build something that's something that you can do in 3 months. This kind of like the infrastructure and everything around this is changing so fast. You don't want the development cycle of like 2 years. You want to be able to ship something in 3 months. And so, and don't just try to think about like a clone of Web 2 or something. You could kind of like be inspired by a Web 2 game, or like a traditional game. Really try to lean in to what this kind of interesting technology gives us. The ability to have this kind of like decentralized governance, decentralized players, kind of crazy tokenomics, without being Ponzi-nomics. And so, yeah, just get involved in trying to build something.
Yeah, I agree. We should build some native game and application in Web3 rather than doing some copycats from Web2.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sounds great. And yeah, it's really nice to have you today. It's a really amazing talk. And look forward to talking with you again next year. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. 12 months is a long time in crypto space. Yeah. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Loaf. Thank you for coming to our podcast.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.